Hey everyone, it's Kenlyn and welcome to your transmission for June 2nd. If I had to label this week, I would call it superconduction. We've got 5 planets in Gemini by the time the new moon hits on Thursday, and we will be full steam ahead in very fast, very etheric energy. And that's going to bring benefits. And also, we have a lot of warnings here and a lot of ways we get to work with the energy. But this is an incredible week. It's one of the best weeks. I think I've said that before. And there's just so much benefic energy right now. And here's something I want to present because we're going to talk about cycles. We're entering into a new cycle. This new cycle's with the new moon. And those are quicker cycles because then we have the full moon later in the month. But we're also experiencing a Venusian cycle, a new Venusian cycle. And this is really beautiful. It's going to merit its own video. Same with the new moon, own video. But here I'm just going to highlight that these new cycles are actually closing out what happened 4 years ago. I think this is so important. And we talked about this in some of our previous transmissions, that there's a lot of closure happening astrologically that got triggered in 2020, that now there are trines, good energy happening. So what that means is that all the breakdown that we collectively experienced, we are collectively receiving the benefit. Now, I really want to emphasize collective, because that, when I was present to that, I was like, oh, that means everyone's getting it. Just as everyone was getting the breakdown, and to the own extent where people can handle it, everyone did their own thing with it. We have free will, we have our own birth charts, our own templates, but everyone experienced it. And same now. Everyone is getting to experience this, and Venus is a personal planet. So there are breakthroughs for everyone. Now, if someone has the ability to receive like this, which means they're only going to let this much in because for whatever reason, they feel safe walling off the world, but only this much in, they're going to get that much. If you've expanded your capacity to receive, then you'll receive more, because the energies are just the energies, and we're either blocking it or we're open to it and receiving. And if you've been on the spiritual path, you've been healing yourself, chances are your capacity to receive has massively expanded, because that's particularly what Venus has meant to do. And we'll talk about that in the Venus video. So I'm going to call this week Superconduction. And the tagline will be elevate your Gemini experience. So let's get it out of the way and just presence the lower octave, the lower frequencies of Gemini. And we probably have Gemini friends and we've teased them about these things. So you already know, like scattered, gossipy, talks too much, all over the place, like a hamster on a habit trail wheel where you're running and it looks like you're really busy, but you're going nowhere, which means no results. So we want to be present to that's how the energy could run if we go on autopilot, if we go unconscious, if we just let it do its thing. That's where it's going to want to go. And it's going to want to pop up into the mind, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is the messenger and the mind. So we're going to get lots of thoughts, and those thoughts could spin us out. It could cause you to forget, space out. So yeah, let's presence that, because that's not the game we're playing. That is not an elevated version of Gemini. And if that happens, you can forgive yourself and then just make a new choice. And you're going to hear the word choice a lot in Gemini season, because Gemini is the twins, duality, and we're here to choose. We always have a choice. We have this and that, always. That's how it's set up here on planet Earth. So the more that you can work the muscle of choosing, and boy, is that a muscle. I have had to work that muscle huge. For those of you who are procrastinators, I should say those of us procrastinators, indecisive, those are up for you now to up level and practice choosing. And I think chances are over the last 4 years, you've really gotten clear about the internal struggles that have kept you from choosing. Like, I don't want to disappoint people. I want my cake and eat it too. That's a very Gemini thing. But we've just went through Taurus. And let's remember, before we get into this transmission, let's remember the gifts of Taurus, because it's included and transcended. It's not to leave behind the gifts of Taurus. The Taurian gifts are embodiment. So while the energy wants to push itself up, we also remember that we're human and our authority is in our bodies. It's never in our minds. The decision-making control is in your embodiment, not in your mind. So first we want to remember that. And then the second thing that Taurus wants to tell us is get committed, make a choice and get committed. And slow and steady wins the race. That's the third thing. Slow and steady wins the race. All right. So now that we have that presenced, because did I mention we have 5 planets in Gemini? Once the new moon happens, that'll be that 5th celestial body. But all of them are making really good aspects to Pluto. So this is where we're getting the gold from what happened over the last 4 years. In many, many ways, there's so much mathematics in astrology around those oppositions are now having beneficial geometry this year, this week. Okay. So in order to elevate our Gemini experience, we're going to have to now know what we're about, who we are and what we're about. And chances are that's also been completely revisited. And we're going to say more about that when we talk about Venus. Because you're going to discover that there are some things for you and some things that are not for you. You're going to stay in your own lane. And when you stay in your own lane, the world opens up. The world knows how to meet you. When you're all over the place, the world does not know how to meet you. It just meets you in all these places. And again, you become that hamster on a habit trail wheel. So as you move into this week, pay attention to downloads from another realm. I love saying that. New inspired visions. We're talking about the new because remember, everything that's happening, all these planets are making beneficial aspects to the Lord of the underworld, who is very happy now with what it is you've done and is adding power to where you're going and is in Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, and it wants to bring in the new. So part of what's happening this week is that we're seeing the beginning of what it is we've been up to around manifesting new Earth. And we've had, I think there's a fruition point, like it's happening, it's coming, but it's not complete at all. And it won't be complete in our lifetime. But we're the intermediaries of the old and the new. So take that role seriously. We have a role that we have to have a lot of faith. We have to have a lot of visionary insight because we're seeing it, but we probably won't experience it except internally. So our job is to take our internal experience of new Earth and live it. Oh, so this is the beginning point where when I was talking about the collective breakdown and the collective trines, the collective benefits, the things that now 5 planets getting a good aspect of Pluto, a benefic aspect of Pluto, everyone is experiencing that. So remember when I said that? That means that in any little way, big, little, small, whatever, People are getting the upgrade. All people are getting the upgrade, even if it's for them that much, if it's for you that much. So this is the beginning of us being able to see the results of New Earth. Does that make sense? I think I'm going to probably get better language on that as more and more I go, but I'm just seeing that this is the time where we have been laboring and we're now, okay, it's happening. Now that requires also two timelines, because this 3D world, there's still people at war. There's horrific atrocities happening. There's polarization. There's hatred. There's propaganda. There's surveillance. There's like all the things that we know is happening on that 3D timeline. And I don't want to discredit the 3D timeline because it's happening. And, you know, the words of Yeshua, he always said, if you have ears to hear and eyes to see, that means you've got to tune into another timeline. That's a mystical principle, an axiom, that if you tune in to something that is not here, you know, you think about, that's the Christ story. I could go into that, but I'm not going to go into that, of like, we want this one thing because this is what's happening on 3D. But the Christ was like, no. Orient your drishti to something bigger, something else, something you can't see, something from the imaginal world. That's what I think is happening. And this is what's happening this week. Okay, so let's get back on track here. Big visions, big ideas. And in Gemini season, that's the best thing you can do is think big. Get your pen and paper out. Gemini likes words. I like to work on big flipboards, map it out, get it down on paper from the mind. There's a grounding aspect when you take your vision and something's going to come through. Something has been coming through. And you're going to write that vision down. And in fact, I have to presence what happened last week that's going to help you. And I want you to remember this, but write it down, map it out, like I draw arrows, I draw boxes, get it down. And then your job is to leave it past the new moon, because it's not action time for that. It's let's see what our embodiment does with it. Let's see what's still alive for us after the new moon. Now, at the end of May, the 30th, 31st of May, something happened, and I want to presence it. It happened very fast, but I noticed it, and I'm curious if you noticed it. And I want to placeholder it if you did. It was called the flash of genius, the flash of brilliance. This is where Uranus and Mercury had a conversation, and there was a flash of brilliance. Uranus is higher mind, cosmic mind, universal mind, and Mercury is a lower octave. It's the personal planet. So it makes it real for us in 3D. Uranus has been in Taurus, breaking down old patterns and beliefs. So any of the internal brick walls have been breaking down, and that's hit somewhere in your chart. Look at where it's hit on your chart. Look at the past few years. It has not finished the cycle. It's not done. It's at 24 degrees. So we go to 30 degrees. It's got 6 more degrees to go. But this particular transit that brought Uranus and Mercury together created a flash of brilliance. And it was probably like that. So I'm not going to tell you what happened because I don't want to put it out there. But I had a flash of brilliance that I wrote down. I shared it with a friend who actually didn't even get it when I said it. I had to share it again, and then they got it and they went, oh, okay, that's interesting. But I saw a new structure for the Evolving Sisters Network that I had not seen before. It made sense. So it wasn't out of thin air that like, oh, now we're going to exist on a spaceship. No, it was a version of things that I had been thinking, but I never thought that thought before. So did that happen to you? Look back. See where you were the 30th, 31st. If something came through, and I just encourage you, write it down, placeholder it, because this is probably what's going to get worked. You don't need to force anything. In fact, it's just like, you don't need to do anything with it. I'm not implementing like, oh, that was such a great idea, I'm going with it. No, that would be like, hold down, slow down. Just know that those are the kinds of things coming in right now. Oh, so these new answers, these new innovations, ways of doing things is what Pluto is all about, and what Pluto will make real in your life and in my life. And this is part of the new cycle, new innovations. It's part of why the old had to go. And mostly what the old that had to go is not just rearranging the furniture in the house. We had to break down the walls and say, oh, the concept of a house, that's over, right? We had to say the concept of square rooms is over. That's kind of like what had to happen. It wasn't like, oh, that couch is outdated. It was like, what's the point of a couch? Do you see what I'm saying? It was so fundamental, and we are very different. And that's bringing in, now we're open and ready to receive what's coming through in the higher mind. I freaking love that. All right. So a couple things happening. I'll use a little astrology speak here. We have Jupiter trining Pluto retrograde. That the trine is a benefic geometry. We have the sun conjuncting Venus. That is huge. I'm going to talk about that later. And we have Mercury moving into Gemini. And that's, Mercury loves Gemini. That's its home sign. And then we have the sun, Mercury, and Venus all making a sextile, which is a good geometry, to the North Node. So what that means for us is that we're going to experience really lighting up our path. That's how I put it, lighting up your path. Messages coming through for your future, and the magnetic pull of what's yours to do as you're open and willing to receive it. So, I mean, that right there is in a nutshell. Do you see how all of that contributes to superconduction? Like, you're ready to go, and the energy is just going to move. And what Pluto did and has been doing is like taking the crust out of, like, you think about superconduction and going down a tube. It's like, it's been like taking the crust out, like the plaque, so that you can just, the blood can flow, the air can flow, you can flow to your next timeline. Whew. I have so many notes here, but I want to just like get a few things down. Jupiter trining Pluto is our up level. It's asking us to step it up. It's like, now you know what your marching orders are, and now you're here to do it. So that's going to help you in Gemini season stay super focused and not spread out all over the place without getting results, because Pluto wants results in the thing that you're here to do. And more, we're figuring out what our medicine is. That's what we've been doing inside the Creators Academy. And then as I prepare women for the Goddess Convergence, which is coming up on June 25th, that's going to be a week-long live of activating the inner goddess. And there's a whole context around the way that the world evolves when 10,000 women activate their inner goddess. And I'll share more about that. So I'm very excited about this energy. It's really what produced this. And it's saying, take that creative idea and make it happen. And that's what I've been doing. So chances are you've been doing the same. And I've been supporting women inside those containers to do it as well. And I've just seen massive up levels. This energy is also about organizing. And I love this piece because it's organizing your body of work. That's also what we've been doing. Women come in and they're just like, I can do all these things. I'm trained in all these modalities. And we're saying, okay, well, what's the through line? Let's find the through line that connects them all. Because if you're just holding yourself out as a person who can do modalities, it's so hard for people to find you and connect to you. That it's just, it doesn't work very often unless it's in certain things like breath work. But even that, when you have a through line, that means you're organized. And that's what Gemini is asking you is to organize it, is to package it. Why? Because it's a way of communicating in superconduction. It's not laborious. I don't have to go like trod through and try to figure out what you're saying. So many beautiful healers just throw things out and expect their audience to do what they can't do, which is figure them out. No. The burden is on us to figure ourselves out and to share it. So that's what we're doing inside of these containers. And it's exactly perfect for Gemini season. We're learning what's ours and then letting go of what's not ours. And I said this in another transmission, and it's super worth repeating a million times. And that is that when you have really owned what is your medicine, there's no more competition. Because you could say, oh, that person is holding women's circles, but that's not my medicine. And you can bow to the one holding your medicine circle, the medicine circle. And you could say, you know what? I could choose that. I'm qualified. I could do that, but it's not mine to do. And so I bow to the woman whose it is hers to do, at least in this time. I mean, we're all evolving. So that gives us so much more generosity toward ourselves and toward others. And you're going to find in this Venus cycle that we have healed the sister wound. I'm going to talk about that, not in this video, in the Venus video. All right. Oof. Previous versions of yourself, they've been sloughed off. So anytime we're talking about stepping into a new expression of ourselves, and I'm going to break this down in the Venus video, we're not talking about just the things that we do, because everything we do has come from our self-image. And that's what Venus has been working. So I'm going to leave that there and come back to that in the Venus video. And then we also have aligned with what is the right frequency. So when we evolve, our frequency, we say, gets higher. Let's say it shifts. It becomes less dense. And in the world, the imaginal world, or the world of the map of consciousness, let's say, the frequencies, the density is the hell realm is a super dense realm. And you can feel that when you listen to politicians speak. And they talk about blaming and shaming and good and bad. And the rhetoric, the density is like low. It feels like you have a sack of rocks on your shoulders and in your heart. So when we evolve and we start moving those sacks off, and we confront our own judgment, and we see that we actually don't know the person that we're judging who's standing in front of us. And most judgment is us looking at ourselves in the mirror. And we start to do that kind of work, then what happens is we become lighter. So then when I encounter the other, and I know I'm really encountering an aspect of me, there's more compassion. And we're going to talk about that in the Venus, because that's definitely what she's been up to. But that means that there's going to be matches in frequency and no matches. Remember Wayne Dyer in his Power of Intention, he went through this match, no match. Like when you're vibing like this is a match, and this over here, this lower octave, not a match. So the no matches are leaving your life. And if you're a no match for someone else, let yourself go out of their life. Don't hold on. That's superconduction. Superconduction is like, okay, can you imagine going super fast down a tube and you're like trying to stop it? And you've got those at like those rubber things. Remember we used to have skates, and you're trying to like put the rubber thing in the bottom to stop it. It's like the stopper. Like that's not superconduction. That's a recipe for you getting pummeled. That's a recipe for when you're like in the ocean swimming and a wave smacks you. You're not going to win. It's just the force is too great. Superconduction has its own energy. You know, in Kundalini, we called it the circumvent force. It is powerful magnetic energy that you cannot stop. So getting alongside of this powerful energy is to remove the resistance. And part of removing resistance is not hanging on to that which wants to go. And it becomes abundantly clear what wants to go, doesn't it? Or you know in your heart that it doesn't serve you anymore and you've got to let it go. So it can go either way, and it can feel crappy either way. So feel the feel, let it move through your system, and then reorient yourself, because where you're going, you've never been before. And that's scary and awesome at the same time. Oh my gosh, there's so much. I think I'm going to stop here. Oh, there's two things about the timeline hopping and reprogramming your mental concept. I think I'll sneak those in the new moon transmission. They're so good, but we've really had a lot to digest in this transmission. It's an incredible time, and everyone is experiencing it. So even if you have a bad day, we're not talking about emotions like that you're supposed to be happy all the time. No. We're talking about your life moving forward, opportunities opening, things releasing and sloughing off and fading away while new horizons come to you. So have at it. I'm just so excited to see how this shows up in your world, in my world, and really in the collective as we hold the frequency of new earth. And may all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts.